Let us talk about addiction. If an action makes you feel good, normally your brain will want to push you to continue in such an action. Actions like eating as it is, drinking any type of drink, even alcohol, smoking, persons who play games, people who engage in gambling, people who engage in conversations for several hours, or people who make use of their phones or who even watch television for several hours and glue to it without wanting to leave. These actions give one pleasure, and they may affect activities of daily living and, of course, life generally. All these actions are what we term as addictive actions, and we say persons who engage in such actions have become addicts or they have engaged in addiction. Now, let us look at a few complexes that make addiction to take place. First, let us look at the complex hormones. What are hormones? Hormones are chemical messengers that are generated in the body for the body use. Hormones such as oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. These are all generated by neurotransmitters and they are influenced by the hormone dopamine. Dopamine is known as the happy hormone because it generates that feeling of pleasure, motivation in an individual, and this is what leads an individual to becoming addict. Because if you do something and you feel good with it, you would always want to do it. So for every action that is done that makes an individual feel good, that hormone dopamine is being activated and it enhances the feeling of pleasure and motivation that an individual gets from an action or from taking a substance. Why are we talking about addiction? Because of the human physiology that always seeks gratification and pleasure. Most times we may engage in actions that we do repeatedly and we may not know that we are addicted to such an action. So if you are engaged in an action that you see that you do them frequently and repeatedly and they give you pleasure, and of course these actions may hamper your relationship with other persons, may hamper the daily activities you engage in, and of course life generally, then know that you are addicted to these actions and you may need to retrace your steps. Addiction is a physiological disease of the brain. By this I mean that it is a whole function of the brain. A part of the brain that is known as the reward system or the reward pathway develops as a way to reinforce behaviors we need for survival. For example, eating. When we eat foods, the reward pathway activates the chemical dopamine, which in turn release a jolt of satisfaction. It is this satisfaction that wants to make an individual to always to return to such a food in future because an individual has gotten satisfaction from this food. Pleasurable actions that lead to addiction becomes a physiological disease because these actions are engaged repeatedly within the brain. So with repeated action or with repeated use or engagement, the chemistry of the brain is altered, leading to the brain chemistry changes, and it also affects some structures in the prefrontal cortex in the brain. This part of the brain is what actually controls decision making and impulse control. Hence, the individual engaging in compulsive behavior and finding it difficult to control certain actions and behaviors. And of course, it will make the individual not to be able to make decisions and also to disengage from such actions, and the person will not be able to make good judgments because the person is already addicted to making such an action because that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is damaged, so it will not allow the individual to make right decisions and judgments. At the sight of an appealing food or a nice smell or something we like generally, there is release of dopamine. But where addiction comes in is the fact that there is excess release of this dopamine, and with repeated release of this dopamine, like I said, there may be damage to the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and this is what leads to alteration in the brain being able to make decision or being able to make judgment about certain things, so that when an individual needs to break free from such an action, the person is no longer able to control him or herself, and of course addiction occurs. As emphasized by the American Society of Addictive Medicine, addiction is not only the lack of willpower or decision making, but rather it is a change in the brain chemistry, and this change can lead to chronic conditions which impact the health, relationship, or overall quality of life of an individual. There are behavioral addictions such as overworking, overeating, binge eating, those who like to go on shopping. And of course, there are substance addictions such as persons who engage in drinking, persons who engage in smoking or people who engage in drugs. Here are some common terms we use to refer to persons who engage in addiction. We can call them addicts, or they could be called junkie, user. Some persons are called dope addicts, potheads, alcoholics, workaholics, shop addicts, dope addicts. Just name them, the list is endless. How do we combat addiction? First, you may need to take a look at some of the actions you do on a day-to-day basis. You may need to take a stock of the things that you do. See which one that you do repeatedly. See which one you waste so much time on. See which one gives you pleasure. And begin to note some of those actions. They may be some of the addictive actions that you have engaged in unknowingly. Secondly, make a list of these actions and begin to think of quitting. Think of some of the steps that you need to take to cut away from these actions. Thirdly, you may need to see a psychotherapist, one who may help you engage in therapies that may help you quit some of these actions that are detrimental or hampering your way of life, your living generally, and of course affecting your day-to-day activities. Quitting addiction will be one of your best decisions so far this year. We are here at Body Gist if you need to speak to us. Do not forget to use the comment section. Till I come your way in the next edition, I am still Sister Ozo Augusta. Bye for now.